The smell of fresh cinnamon rolls drifted through my kitchen window as I pulled the last batch from the oven at 5:30 a.m. Saturday mornings were my busiest time at Sweet Dreams Bakery, the home-based business I'd been running for 3 years from my converted garage. By 7 a.m., I'd have 24 regular customers lined up for their weekend treats, and by noon my inventory would be completely sold out. I'd spent 2 years getting every permit, license and health department approval required to operate a legal home bakery in our city. The process had been exhausting. Health inspections, zoning approvals, business licenses, food handler certification. But I'd done everything by the book because I knew that running a food business from home would attract scrutiny from neighbors who didn't understand the regulations. Most of my neighbors had been supportive. Mrs. Patterson next door often praised my apple turnovers, and the young couple across the street were regular customers for my chocolate chip cookies. But Robert Henley, who lived in the oversized McMansion 2 houses down, had made his disapproval clear from the moment I'd started operating. "This is a residential neighborhood," he declared during our first confrontation 6 months ago, when he'd marched over while I was setting up my weekend display table. "We didn't buy homes here to live next to some commercial operation." Robert was the kind of man who wore pressed khakis to check his mailbox and maintained his lawn with the precision of a golf course superintendent. At 52, he owned a successful accounting firm downtown and never missed an opportunity to remind the neighborhood that his property taxes were probably higher than most people's annual salaries. "I have all the proper permits, Mr. Henley," I'd explained patiently, showing him my city-issued home occupation license. The city allows home-based food businesses with proper licensing. He'd examined my permit with the dismissive attention of someone looking for flaws. "We'll see about that," he'd muttered before stalking back to his house. That had been 6 months ago. Since then, Robert had found increasingly creative ways to express his displeasure. He'd file noise complaints about my 5 a.m. baking schedule, despite the fact that my kitchen was insulated and I used equipment specifically designed for quiet operation. He'd complain to the Homeowners Association about the commercial traffic my Saturday customers generated, even though most walked from the neighborhood and the few who drove parked legally on the street. What Robert didn't know was that my background wasn't actually in baking. It was in forensic accounting. I'd spent 15 years working for the IRS, investigating tax fraud and unreported income before starting my bakery as a semi-retirement project. Old habits die hard, and I developed the unconscious tendency to notice financial discrepancies in my daily life. Like the fact that Robert claimed to live alone in his expensive house while consistently having different cars parked in his driveway overnight. Or the way he'd mentioned his rental properties to other neighbors while simultaneously complaining about property taxes as if he only owned his primary residence. Or the pattern of young professionals I'd seen coming and going from his house with moving boxes and furniture. This morning, as I arranged fresh pastries in my display case, I noticed Robert standing on his front porch with his phone pressed to his ear, staring directly at my setup. His body language radiated satisfaction in a way that made my stomach tighten with anticipation. 20 minutes later, a white city van pulled up in front of my house. 2 men in official-looking polo shirts climbed out, clipboards in hand, and walked toward my bakery display. Behind them, Robert emerged from his house with the self-satisfied stride of someone who'd just scored a victory. "Are you the operator of this food establishment?" asked the taller inspector, a middle-aged man with graying temples and tired eyes. "I am. I'm Sarah Martinez, owner of Sweet Dreams Bakery." I wiped my hands on my apron, mentally preparing for what I knew was coming. "We've received a complaint about an illegal food operation," the second inspector said, consulting his clipboard. "The complainant alleges you're operating a commercial kitchen without proper permits and potentially violating health codes." Robert had positioned himself at the edge of my driveway, close enough to hear every word but far enough to maintain plausible deniability about his involvement. His expression was a masterpiece of false concern mixed with barely contained glee. "I'd be happy to show you my permits," I said calmly, reaching for the folder I kept specifically for these occasions. "I have my home occupation license, food handler's permit, and all required health department approvals." The inspectors examined my documentation with professional thoroughness. As they reviewed each permit, I watched Robert's confident expression begin to waver slightly. "These all appear to be in order," the first inspector said after several minutes. Your kitchen setup meets commercial standards and all your licenses are current. He looked around at my organized display, noting the proper temperature controls and sanitary conditions. Frankly, this is one of the most professionally run home bakeries I've seen. So she can keep operating? Robert called out, abandoning any pretense that he wasn't the complainant. The inspector turned toward him with mild irritation. Sir, this business is fully licensed and compliant with all city regulations. There's no violation here. Robert's face flushed red. But this is a residential neighborhood. She's running a commercial operation out of her garage. Which is perfectly legal with proper permits, the second inspector replied. Home-based food businesses are specifically allowed under City Code 15.2.7, as long as they meet health and safety requirements. I watched Robert struggle to process this information. He'd been so confident that his complaint would shut me down, so certain that I was operating illegally, that he hadn't considered the possibility that I might actually know what I was doing. Maybe now you'll get a real job instead of poisoning the neighborhood, Robert snapped, his frustration boiling over into open hostility. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Both inspectors looked uncomfortable at the naked aggression in Robert's voice. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, but the familiar clarity that came when someone pushed me too far. Actually, Mr. Henley, I said quietly, my voice carrying the professional calm I'd perfected during 15 years of conducting IRS investigations. Since we're discussing business operations and city compliance, I should mention that I've been documenting some interesting patterns in your rental income reporting. Robert went very still. What are you talking about? I smiled pleasantly, the same expression I'd used when presenting evidence to tax evaders who thought they were smarter than the system. Well, you've mentioned your rental properties to several neighbors, and I've noticed quite a bit of residential turnover at your address. Young professionals moving in and out with furniture, different cars in your driveway every few months. It's created an interesting pattern that someone with my background tends to notice. Your background? Robert's voice had lost its earlier confidence. I spent 15 years as a forensic accountant with the IRS before starting my bakery. Old habits, you know. I can't help but notice discrepancies between reported income and observed lifestyle patterns. The inspectors were watching this exchange with growing interest. Robert's face had gone from red to pale in the span of 30 seconds. For instance, I continued conversationally, rental income from your primary residence would need to be reported on your tax returns. And if you're claiming homestead exemptions while simultaneously operating a rental business from the same property, well, that creates some interesting compliance questions. Robert opened his mouth, then closed it without speaking. I could practically see his mental gears grinding as he tried to figure out exactly how much I knew and how much I was guessing. Of course, I'm retired from that line of work now, I said, turning back to the inspectors with a smile. I much prefer baking to investigating tax fraud. Speaking of which, would either of you gentlemen like to try a cinnamon roll? They're fresh from the oven. The inspectors accepted my offer gratefully, probably happy to defuse the tension that had suddenly developed between Robert and me. As they bit into the warm pastries, both made appreciative sounds. These are incredible, the first inspector said. You've definitely got the right permits for the right business. After the inspectors left with boxes of pastries for their colleagues, Robert and I stood in my driveway facing each other. The satisfied gloating had completely disappeared from his expression, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. What exactly do you think you know? He asked quietly. I considered my answer carefully. During my IRS years, I'd learned that the most effective investigations started with letting subjects know they were being watched without revealing the full scope of what you'd discovered. I know that rental income has to be reported as taxable income, Robert. And I know that claiming homestead exemptions on property that's being used for rental purposes constitutes tax fraud. I paused, letting that sink in. I also know that the IRS pays attention to tips from credible sources, especially when those sources have forensic accounting backgrounds. Robert was quiet for a long moment, staring at his expensive house with new eyes. What do you want? I want to run my legal licensed bakery without harassment from neighbors who don't understand city regulations. I want to serve my customers without someone calling false complaints to shut me down. I met his eyes directly. Basically, I want to be left alone to do my job. The transformation in Robert's behavior over the following weeks was remarkable. No more noise complaints, no more homeowners association protests, no more hostile glares when I set up my Saturday display. In fact, he went out of his way to avoid any interaction with me whatsoever. But my forensic instincts had been activated, and I found myself paying closer attention to the patterns I'd been noticing for months. Robert's rental business was more extensive than I'd initially realized. He was operating what appeared to be a short-term rental operation from his primary residence, rotating tenants every few months while claiming homestead exemptions that reduced his property taxes. 3 weeks after the inspector incident, I was reviewing my own business records when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I recognized from my IRS days. "Sarah, it's Jim Morrison from Criminal Investigation. How's retirement treating you?" Jim had been my partner on several major fraud cases. We'd stayed in touch after I'd left the agency, and he occasionally asked for informal consultation on cases that fell into my areas of expertise. "It's treating me well, Jim. Though I seem to have stumbled across something that might interest your department." "Oh, still can't turn off the investigative instincts." I looked out my kitchen window toward Robert's house, where a young couple was loading boxes into a U-Haul truck. The third tenant turnover I'd witnessed in 6 months. Something like that. I've got a neighbor who's operating what appears to be an unreported rental business while claiming homestead exemptions. The income pattern suggests significant underreporting. Jim's voice became more focused. "Tell me more." I spent the next 20 minutes walking Jim through my observations. The pattern of short-term tenants, the rental income that almost certainly wasn't being reported, the homestead exemption fraud, the discrepancy between Robert's claimed residential status and his actual business operations. "How solid is your documentation?" Jim asked. "Solid enough to justify opening an investigation. I've got photos, dates, rental patterns, property records. If someone wanted to build a case, the foundation is already there. And you're willing to serve as a confidential informant if we pursue this?" I thought about Robert's smug satisfaction as he'd called the city to shut down my legal business. His sneer when he told me to get a real job. His assumption that he could harass a neighbor without consequences. Absolutely. The IRS investigation took 6 months to complete. During that time, Robert's behavior toward me remained studiously polite. He'd nod when we saw each other getting mail, but he never tried to engage in conversation. I suspected he knew something was coming but wasn't sure what or when. The first sign that the investigation was concluding came when I noticed Robert's real estate agent putting up a "for sale" sign in his front yard. The second sign was the official-looking sedan that parked in front of his house one Tuesday morning, followed by 2 men in suits carrying briefcases. Jim called me that afternoon. "We're closing the investigation today. Your neighbor has agreed to pay back taxes, penalties, and interest totaling $47,000. He's also agreed to sell the property and relocate rather than face criminal charges." I felt a familiar satisfaction, the same feeling I'd gotten when fraudsters realized they'd finally been caught. How much income was he hiding? About $180,000 over 3 years. He was operating a short-term rental business, reporting maybe 20% of his actual income, and claiming homestead exemptions the entire time. Pretty brazen, honestly. That evening, Robert knocked on my door for the first time since the inspector incident. He stood on my porch looking older than his 52 years, his usual arrogance replaced by exhausted defeat. "I know it was you," he said quietly. "I didn't deny it. You called the city to shut down my legal business because you didn't like having a neighbor who worked from home. Unfortunately for you, you picked the wrong neighbor to mess with." Robert nodded slowly. "The house goes on the market officially tomorrow. I'll be gone by the end of next month. Good luck with your fresh start, Robert. Maybe in your new neighborhood, you'll think twice before harassing people who haven't done anything wrong." After he left, I stood in my kitchen preparing the next day's inventory, thinking about how differently things might have gone if Robert had simply minded his own business. If he'd accepted that my bakery was legal and properly licensed. If he'd chosen tolerance over harassment. Instead, he targeted someone with the exact professional background needed to recognize and investigate his own illegal activities. The irony was almost perfect. A tax fraud case developed because the perpetrator tried to shut down a legal business operated by a former IRS investigator. 6 months later, my bakery is thriving more than ever. Without Robert's constant complaints and harassment, I've been able to expand my Saturday hours and add Sunday afternoon service. The new neighbors who bought Robert's house are a young family who've become regular customers for my chocolate chip cookies. Sometimes I think about Robert's parting words. Maybe now you'll get a real job instead of poisoning the neighborhood. He'd meant it as an insult, but it revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of who he was dealing with. I had gotten a real job. I'd spent 15 years investigating people exactly like him. The difference was that now I got to bake cinnamon rolls while doing it. And occasionally, when someone tried to shut down my legal business through false complaints and harassment, I got to remind them that forensic accounting skills never really go away. They just get repurposed into more satisfying forms of justice. I sat at my graduation party, watching my twin sister Olivia bask in the attention she didn't deserve. The backyard of our childhood home was decorated with balloons and streamers, but somehow my graduation from business school had become all about her new job. Executive Marketing Director at Phoenix Industries. Mom gushed, refilling everyone's champagne glasses. Our Olivia heading one of the biggest marketing departments in the country. I sipped my water quietly, remembering the email I'd received just that morning. As Chief Operations Officer of Phoenix Industries, I had access to every hiring decision, including my twin sister's application, which had more creative writing than a fiction novel. Madison, Dad's voice pulled me from my thoughts. Maybe your sister can put in a good word for you at Phoenix. I'm sure they have some entry-level positions available. The irony was almost laughable. Almost. That's thoughtful, Dad, I replied carefully, but I already have a job lined up. Oh. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Where? Before I could answer, Olivia cut in, her voice syrupy sweet. Maddie's probably just going to do some consulting work. Until she figures out what she really wants to do. Our assembled relatives nodded sympathetically. Poor Madison, always living in her twin's shadow. Never quite as successful, never quite as driven. If only they knew. Actually, I started, but Mom interrupted. Olivia, honey, tell everyone about your corner office. And the salary, what was it again? $175,000 base, Olivia preened, plus bonuses and stock options. The CEO himself signed off on my package. I almost choked on my water. The CEO hadn't signed anything, I had. And the salary she quoted was about $50,000 more than what was actually offered. You must be so excited to start, Aunt Sarah chimed in. When do you begin? Monday. Olivia beamed. I already bought a whole new wardrobe. Have to look the part, I checked my watch. In exactly 48 hours, my dear sister would learn what looking the part really meant. Madison, Mom turned to me, her smile tighter. Maybe you could help your sister move into her office? Get a feel for the corporate environment. Oh, I'll definitely be there on Monday, I assured her. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The party continued, a steady stream of relatives congratulating Olivia while offering me condolences disguised as encouragement. Your time will come, they'd say, or, not everyone can be an executive right away. I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment away from the facade. As I stood by the sink, I could hear Dad through the window talking to Uncle James. At least one of them made something of themselves, he sighed. Madison. Well, she's always been the cautious one. Too afraid to take risks, to really put herself out there. Too afraid? I thought about the risks I'd taken at 22, when I'd mortgaged everything I owned to buy shares in a failing tech startup. How I'd worked 80-hour weeks, sleeping on office floors, eating vending machine dinners, while transforming that company into what became Phoenix Industries. Remember when they were kids? Uncle James replied. Olivia always knew what she wanted. Born leader, that one. Madison just followed along. I gripped the counter, remembering all the times Olivia had taken credit for my ideas, my achievements. Even in school, she'd copy my homework, then somehow convince the teachers she was the clever one. Madison. My cousin Emma's voice startled me. She stood in the kitchen doorway, holding an empty plate. Are you okay? Fine, I smiled. Just needed a break from all the excitement. Emma hesitated. It's weird. I applied to Phoenix Industries last year in the marketing department. They're incredibly selective. I have a master's in marketing and 10 years of experience, but I didn't even get an interview. How did Olivia? Good question, I murmured. Very good question. Just then Olivia breezed into the kitchen, her designer heels clicking on the tile floor. Maddie, there you are. I was just telling everyone about my team. 20 people reporting directly to me. Can you imagine? I could imagine quite well. Especially since the actual position she'd been hired for had a team of 3, not 20. And she definitely wouldn't be reporting directly to the CEO, as she'd been claiming all afternoon. That's quite a responsibility, I said neutrally. Managing such a large team right from the start. Oh, I'm not worried, she waved her hand dismissively. Leadership comes naturally to me. Unlike some people, she added with a pointed look in my direction. Emma slipped out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with my twin. For identical sisters, we couldn't have been more different. While Olivia wore a designer dress and perfectly styled hair, I was comfortable in my simple black pantsuit. She commanded attention, I preferred to observe. She took shortcuts, I did the work. You know, Olivia lowered her voice, I could help you get in at Phoenix. Maybe as my assistant? It would be like old times, you supporting me, making me look good. The memories flooded back. School projects where she'd present my work as her own, college internships where she'd take credit for my ideas, family events where she'd shine while keeping me in the background. That's very generous, I replied, my voice steady. But about your position. Oh, don't be jealous, Maddie, she cut me off. We can't all be executives. Some people are just meant to be support staff. I checked my phone. A new email had just arrived from HR at Phoenix Industries, confirming Monday's orientation schedule. Olivia's name was on the list, but not for the position she thought she had. You're right, I said, pocketing my phone. Monday will be very interesting. Olivia raised her perfectly groomed eyebrows. What's that supposed to mean? Before I could answer, Mom called from the backyard. Olivia, come quick. Dad's about to make a toast. My sister flounced out, leaving me alone in the kitchen. I pulled out my phone again, this time opening the real offer letter I'd approved for Olivia. Entry-level marketing coordinator, reporting to a mid-level manager, who reported to a director who reported to me. The party was winding down, but Dad insisted on one final toast. He stood at the head of the table, champagne glass raised high. To my daughters, he began, his smile directed entirely at Olivia, on their graduation day. Though their paths have led them in different directions, we're so proud of what they've achieved. Especially Olivia, who's already secured an executive position at one of the country's top companies. To success. To success, everyone echoed while I sat quietly waiting for Monday to arrive. Monday morning arrived bright and clear. I sat in my corner office on the top floor of Phoenix Industries headquarters, watching the early morning traffic flow through the city below. My assistant knocked softly. Ms. Mitchell? Your sister just checked in at reception for new employee orientation. I smiled, straightening my nameplate. Madison Mitchell, Chief Operations Officer. Perfect. Let's give her the full Phoenix experience. Through the security cameras, I watched Olivia strut into the lobby, wearing an outfit that cost more than her actual monthly salary would be. She bypassed the orientation group, heading straight for the executive elevator. I'm sorry, ma'am, the security guard stopped her. That elevator is for executive staff only. New employee orientation is in the West Wing, ground floor. There must be a mistake, Olivia laughed. I'm the new executive marketing director. I'm supposed to meet with the CEO this morning. The security guard checked his tablet. I have an Olivia Mitchell scheduled for new employee orientation. Marketing department, entry-level position. Entry-level. Olivia's voice rose. No, that's impossible. I have an offer letter right here. She dug through her designer bag, pulling out the letter she'd shown everyone at the party. The guard examined it, then made a call. Sure. Yes, I have someone here with what appears to be an altered offer letter. Olivia's face went pale. Altered? No, this is what they sent me. Call the CEO, he'll confirm everything. The CEO doesn't handle entry-level hiring, a new voice said. Sarah Chin, our HR director, walked up holding a folder. Ms. Mitchell, I have your actual offer letter here. Marketing coordinator, starting salary $45,000, reporting to team lead Jessica Martinez. 45. Olivia swayed slightly. No, there's been a mistake. I was promised $175,000, A corner office, a team of 20 people. Ms. Mitchell, Sarah's voice was professional but firm. Falsifying offer letters is grounds for immediate termination. However, given that you haven't officially started yet, we're willing to overlook this misunderstanding. Your orientation group is waiting. I watched on the camera as Sarah led my shell-shocked sister toward the West Wing. Time for Phase 2. Send in the morning reports, I told my assistant. Right on cue, my office phone rang. Madison. It was Mom. There's something wrong at Phoenix. Olivia just called crying about some mix-up with her position. Really? I kept my voice neutral. How strange. She says they're claiming she's only hired for an entry-level job. There must be some mistake. Can't you call someone there? Maybe reach out to HR. Actually, Mom, I can do better than that. Put Olivia on the phone. A moment later, my sister's voice came through, thick with tears and rage. Maddie, you have to help me. These people are trying to humiliate me. Come up to the executive floor, I said calmly. Top level, corner office on the right. But, the security guard said. Just show them your ID. Trust me. 20 minutes later, Olivia walked into my office, her confident strut replaced by uncertain steps. She stopped dead when she saw my nameplate. What is this? Welcome to Phoenix Industries, I said, standing up. I'm Madison Mitchell, Chief Operations Officer and head of all departmental operations, including, of course, the marketing department. Olivia sank into one of the visitor chairs, her designer dress suddenly looking costume-like in the harsh morning light. How long? She whispered. 3 years, I replied. Remember that consulting work I was doing after college? I was actually helping turn around a struggling tech company. Made some smart investments, worked my way up. Became CEO last year. Why didn't you tell me? I laughed. Would you have believed me? Besides, you never asked. You were too busy talking about yourself. The offer letter. Ah, yes. I pulled up her file on my computer. You submitted quite an impressive resume. 10 years of marketing experience while we were in college. Executive positions at companies that don't exist. Glowing references from people who've never heard of you. I can explain. Save it, I cut her off. Here's what's going to happen. You have 2 choices. Option 1. You leave now and I'll make sure the falsified offer letter doesn't follow you to your next job search. She swallowed hard. And option 2? You take the position you actually earned. Marketing coordinator, entry level. You work hard, learn the business properly, and maybe in a few years, you'll earn that corner office for real. You're serious? Completely. I stood up, walking to the window. For once in your life, Olivia, you'll have to succeed on your own merits. No shortcuts, no lying, no riding on someone else's coattails. Just then, my office door burst open. Mom and Dad rushed in, stopping short when they saw me behind the executive desk. Madison. Dad's voice was barely a whisper. What is this? This, I gestured around the office, is what happens when you're too afraid to take risks. When you're the cautious one, who's always following along. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. You mean you're Chief Operations Officer of Phoenix Industries? Yes. I've been for a while now. Though you never asked what I was doing all those years, I was figuring things out. Dad sank into the other visitor chair. But, at the party, you let us think. I let you think what you always think, I said quietly. That Olivia was the successful one. The achiever. Even when she was lying about her credentials, taking credit for others' work, you never questioned it. Because it fit your narrative. Madison, we never meant. Mom started. To constantly compare us. To praise her every move while dismissing mine. To assume she was destined for success while I was destined for support roles. Olivia stood up suddenly. I'll take option 2. We all turned to look at her. The entry-level position, she clarified. I'll take it. And I'll earn it this time. For real. I nodded slowly. Report to HR. They'll get you started with the proper orientation. After she left, my parents stayed, looking lost in the executive office they never imagined I'd occupy. All those family dinners, Dad said quietly, when we asked about your work and you just said it's going fine. Would you have believed the truth? I asked. Or would you have assumed I was exaggerating like you always did when I achieved something Olivia hadn't? Mom wiped tears from her eyes. We were wrong. So wrong. Yes, you were. I sat back down behind my desk. Now I have a company to run. You can see yourselves out. Over the next few months, things changed dramatically. Olivia, stripped of her false confidence, actually proved to be a decent entry-level employee. She worked hard, learned the business, and slowly earned genuine respect from her colleagues. Mom and Dad stopped their constant comparisons, finally seeing us as individuals rather than competing twins. They hung my executive portrait next to Olivia's team photo at home. Different levels, different paths, both valuable in their own ways. 6 months later, I called Olivia into my office again. She entered differently this time. Professionally, confidently, but without the fake bravado. Your team lead says you're doing well, I said, reviewing her performance reports. Top performer in your group last quarter. I actually love the work, she admitted. Really love it, not just the status I thought it would bring. I nodded. That's why I'm approving your promotion to junior marketing manager. You earned this one, Olivia. For real. She smiled, not her old, superior smirk, but something genuine. Thank you, Maddie. Not just for the promotion, but for, stopping me from continuing down that path. Sometimes success isn't about being first or best, I said. Sometimes it's about being honest, working hard, and earning your way forward. As she left my office, I thought about our graduation party just 6 months ago. How different things were now. Sometimes the best revenge isn't exposing someone's lies. It's giving them the chance to find their own truth. I picked up my phone to call Mom. We had a lot of history to work through, but at least now we could start with honesty. After all, success comes in many forms, and sometimes the quietest path leads to the highest peak. Looking out over the city from my corner office, I smiled. The view was better when you earned it honestly. I stood in the lobby of Anderson Manufacturing, watching employees struggle with their ancient computer system. Every crashed screen, every frozen terminal, every frustrated groan felt like vindication. In exactly 1 hour, their entire network would switch to my software, and my parents would finally understand what their computer-obsessed daughter had built. 10 years ago, I sat at our family dinner table, trying to explain to my parents why I was leaving my secure job at their company to start my own software firm. This is ridiculous, Sophia. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You have a guaranteed future here. Vice President of Sales by 35. What more could you want? I looked around at the dining room where every major family decision had been made for 3 generations. The walls were lined with photos of Anderson Manufacturing's history. My grandfather founding the company in 1965, my father taking over in 1990, the ribbon-cutting ceremonies for each new factory. None of those photos showed how desperately the company needed to modernize. Dad, the world is changing, I tried to explain. Every manufacturing company will need custom software solutions within the next decade. If we don't adapt. Quit wasting time with computers, he interrupted. This company was built on real work, not playing around with technology. Mom reached across the table, patting my hand with forced sympathy. Sweetheart, your father knows best. He's kept this company successful for 30 years. These tech startups, they come and go like fashion trends. I pulled my hand away, thinking about the software I'd been developing in secret for the past 2 years. Working late nights after my regular shift, I'd created a manufacturing management system that could revolutionize how companies like Anderson operated. I'm not asking for your permission, I said quietly. I'm giving you my 2 weeks' notice. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face turned that dangerous shade of red that always preceded an explosion. Mom's perfectly maintained smile cracked slightly. If you walk away from this company, Dad's voice was low and controlled, don't expect any support. No startup capital, no family connections, nothing. I don't need your money, I replied, standing up. I need you to understand that the future isn't going to wait for Anderson Manufacturing to catch up. That night, I moved out of my comfortable corporate apartment into a tiny studio above a Chinese restaurant. The next morning, Nova Systems was born. Though back then it was just me, my laptop, and an idea that would either prove my parents wrong or bankrupt me completely. The first year was brutal. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, coding 18 hours a day to perfect my software. Every potential client asked the same questions. How many other companies use your system? How long have you been in business? Where's your track record? Meanwhile, Anderson Manufacturing stuck to their outdated methods. Dad proudly declared at industry events that his company believed in traditional values, not trendy technology. Mom hosted dinner parties where she carefully avoided mentioning what her daughter was doing these days. My breakthrough came unexpectedly. A small electronics manufacturer took a chance on my software after their existing system crashed, losing 3 months of production data. Within weeks, their efficiency increased by 40%. Word spread. Suddenly, Nova Systems wasn't just my dream anymore. We moved into real offices, hired developers, expanded our product line. Every success felt like a quiet rebuttal to my father's dismissal of playing around with technology. I kept tabs on Anderson Manufacturing through industry contacts. Their computer systems, ancient when I left, were now practically prehistoric. Employees complained about lost data, inefficient processes, and daily system crashes. But Dad refused to change, insisting that computers shouldn't run a manufacturing business. Then came the global supply chain crisis. Companies without modern inventory management systems found themselves unable to adapt. Anderson Manufacturing started losing clients to more technologically advanced competitors. Last month, their biggest client threatened to leave unless they modernized their systems immediately. Dad's solution? Hire an expensive consultant who recommended exactly what I'd tried to tell him 10 years ago. They needed comprehensive software modernization. The irony? Nova Systems was now the industry leader in manufacturing software solutions. Our client list included 8 of the top 10 manufacturers in the country. The consultant's first choice for Anderson's modernization was my company, though he didn't realize the connection. I kept my identity hidden during the bidding process, operating through my CEO title rather than my name. Dad's pride would have never allowed him to knowingly buy software from his computer-obsessed daughter. The contract was signed yesterday. In 1 hour, every computer in Anderson Manufacturing would display the Nova Systems logo during the system changeover. Every employee would watch their outdated terminals transform into state-of-the-art manufacturing management tools. And my parents would finally understand exactly what their daughter had built while they were dismissing her dreams as a waste of time. My phone buzzed. A text from my younger brother Michael, the only family member who had supported my decision to leave. Mom and Dad just arrived at the office. Everything ready. I smiled, watching the installation team make final preparations. Right on schedule. How's Dad's blood pressure? Through the roof. He's been ranting about being forced to surrender to technology. You sure about this? I thought about all the family dinners I'd missed, all the holiday gatherings where my success couldn't be mentioned, all the times Mom had told her friends I was finding myself, instead of admitting I was running a multi-million-dollar tech company. Yes, I replied. It's time they understood what their wasted daughter actually accomplished. The lobby was filling up now. Employees gathered around their workstations, waiting for the system changeover to begin. Through the glass walls of the executive suite, I could see my father pacing, probably making one last speech about the evils of modern technology. Mom stood beside him, nodding sympathetically while checking her phone, probably looking up Nova Systems, trying to understand why this mysterious company commanded such high prices. She wouldn't find much. I'd kept our ownership private, operating through holding companies and subsidiaries. As far as the public knew, Nova Systems was run by an anonymous tech genius who never gave interviews. My assistant approached, tablet in hand. Everything's ready, Ms. Anderson. Would you like to start the installation? I straightened my blazer. Armani, not the discount suits I'd worn when I worked here, and smiled. Let's show Anderson Manufacturing what wasting time with computers really looks like. The digital countdown on the main screen reached 0, and Anderson Manufacturing's old system shut down for the last time. In the executive suite, I watched my father grip the edge of his desk, as if he could physically hold on to the past he was so desperate to preserve. Beginning system migration, my lead engineer announced over the intercom. All terminals will restart in 3, 2, 1. Screens throughout the building flickered to life. The Nova Systems logo, my logo, appeared on every monitor, its sleek design replacing the dated Anderson Manufacturing interface. A collective gasp rippled through the office as employees witnessed their archaic workstations transform into something from the future they'd been denied. "What is this?" My father's voice boomed from the executive suite. "This isn't what we agreed to. Get me whoever's in charge of this Nova company immediately." I smiled, straightening my suit jacket. "I believe he's asking for me." My assistant raised an eyebrow. "Would you like security on standby?" "No need," I replied. Family meetings never required security before. Why start now? I took the familiar path to my father's office, remembering all the times I'd walked this route as a junior employee. Back then I'd been invisible, just Robert Anderson's daughter, playing with computers instead of learning real business. The door was open. Dad stood behind his desk, face flushed with anger. Mom sat in her usual spot on the leather sofa, where she'd always held court during important company meetings. Neither looked up as I entered. "I demand to speak with Nova's CEO," Dad announced without turning. "This takeover of our systems is completely—" "Hello, Dad." The words hung in the air like smoke. Fully he turned. Mom's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. "Sophia." "Surprise," I said softly. "Still think I'm wasting time with computers?" Dad's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, confusion, disbelief, and finally the beginning of understanding. You're Nova Systems? Founder and CEO. I moved to the window, looking out over the manufacturing floor where workers were already exploring their new systems. "That trendy technology you dismissed? It's now worth more than Anderson Manufacturing's entire market value." Mom stood up, smoothing her designer dress with trembling hands. "But all these years, you never said anything. Would you have listened?" I turned back to face them. "When I tried to tell you this company needed to modernize, you told me to trust Dad's experience. When I wanted to develop new software, you said I was throwing away my future. So I built that future myself without the Anderson name or connections." "This is impossible." Dad sank into his chair. "Nova Systems is, they're the industry leader in manufacturing software. They have contracts with 8 of the top 10 manufacturers in the country." I finished for him. "Yes, I know. I signed those contracts personally." Through the glass walls I could see employees gathering, whispering as they realized who was in the executive suite. The daughter they remembered as the quiet IT manager was back. But now their entire company depended on her software. "Why didn't you tell us?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "When you became successful." "Successful?" I laughed softly. "Mom, I've been successful for years. I tried to help Anderson Manufacturing modernize because I cared about this company's future. But you and Dad were so convinced I was just playing around that you couldn't see what I was building." Dad stood up suddenly, moving to his computer. "Show me," he demanded. "Show me what your system can do." I walked over, logged into the administrator account and pulled up the main dashboard. Real-time production metrics, inventory management, predictive maintenance schedules. Everything I'd dreamed of implementing a decade ago was now reality. "This tracks every aspect of manufacturing operations," I explained, clicking through screens. "It predicts maintenance needs before equipment fails, optimizes inventory levels automatically, and reduces production delays by 60%. 60%? Dad's voice cracked. "That's not possible. Check the data yourself." I pulled up comparison charts. "These are results from our other clients. Anderson Manufacturing has been operating at 40% efficiency compared to your competitors. That's why you've been losing contracts." Mom approached cautiously, peering at the screen. "All those dinner parties where I told people you were finding yourself." "I was building a company valued at over $300 million, I finished for her. "But it was easier to let you think I was struggling than try to convince you I understood modern business better than you did." A knock at the door interrupted us. Michael entered, trying to hide his grin. "Sis, the employees are requesting a demonstration of the new system. Should I tell them the CEO of Nova Systems is otherwise engaged?" Dad's head snapped up. "You knew about this?" "Someone had to believe in her," Michael shrugged. "Besides, watching you realize your computer-obsessed daughter now owns the software running your entire company? Priceless." I moved toward the door. "I should give that demonstration. The employees deserve to understand the tools they'll be using." "Wait," Dad called out. His voice had lost its usual authority, replaced by something I'd never heard before: uncertainty. Why did you agree to take us on as a client? After everything? I paused at the door. Because despite everything, I still care about this company's future. And because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying what others built. It's building something better yourself. The next hour was surreal. I stood in the company auditorium, explaining Nova Systems' features to the same employees who had watched me leave in disgrace 10 years ago. Their faces showed a mix of awe and embarrassment as they realized the quiet girl who'd tried to modernize their systems was now a tech industry leader. My parents sat in the back row, uncharacteristically silent. Mom had stopped checking her phone, probably realizing she'd need my software to use it efficiently anyway. Dad's face had settled into a strange expression somewhere between pride and humiliation. After the demonstration, as employees filed out whispering excitedly about their new tools, Dad approached me. "The consultant," he said quietly. "The one who recommended Nova Systems. Did he know?" "No," I smiled. "He chose us because we're the best in the industry. The fact that it forced you to recognize my success was just a bonus." "I was wrong," he admitted, the words seemingly painful to speak. "About computers, about modernization, about you. Yes, you were. But being wrong taught me something important." I gestured to the Nova Systems logo glowing on every screen. Sometimes the people who dismiss your dreams become the proof that those dreams were worth pursuing. Over the next few weeks, Anderson Manufacturing underwent a complete transformation. Production efficiency increased dramatically. The client who had threatened to leave signed a new long-term contract. Employees who had once feared technology embraced the tools that made their jobs easier. Mom started telling her friends about her brilliant daughter in tech, though she still struggled to explain exactly what Nova Systems did. Dad hung a photo of me in the company lobby, the first woman to appear on Anderson Manufacturing's wall of history. 3 months after the system changeover, I sat in my office at Nova headquarters, reviewing Anderson's performance metrics. They had become one of our success stories, proof that even the most traditional companies could thrive in the digital age. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom: "Having a dinner party tonight. Would the CEO of Nova Systems consider attending?" I smiled, thinking of all the dinner parties where they'd avoided mentioning my career. Only if Dad promises not to complain about trendy technology. "He's actually showing off your software to anyone who'll listen," Michael chimed in on our group chat. "Pretty sure he's finally ready to admit that wasting time with computers was the best decision you ever made." That evening, I walked into my parents' house for the first time in years. The dining room walls still held the history of Anderson Manufacturing, but now included a magazine cover featuring Nova Systems' latest innovations. My parents had finally learned to celebrate a different kind of success. Dad raised his glass as I sat down. "To the future of Anderson Manufacturing," he announced to their guests, "and to the daughter who saw that future before any of us were ready to accept it." I lifted my own glass, but my thoughts were already on Nova's next breakthrough. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about being so right that they have no choice but to see it for themselves. And sometimes, the sweetest victory isn't in the moment of revelation, but in watching those who dismissed you gradually realize that you built exactly what they said was impossible. Every time my father logs into his computer now, my logo reminds him that sometimes the future arrives whether you're ready for it or not. The next morning, I received an interesting email. Another traditional manufacturing company was seeking modernization. The sender? My father's oldest friend, owner of a company even more resistant to technology than Anderson had been. I smiled, thinking about how different this pitch meeting would be. After all, nothing sells software like seeing your stubbornest competitor succeed with it. And nothing validates your dreams quite like watching them transform an entire industry, one outdated system at a time.